Hi, I'm Lisa Haisha. Welcome to the Legacy series. Today I have Melanie Holmes, and I met her because she contacted me about a book she was writing. She wanted me to write a foreword or a blurb about it, some testimonial about motherhood. Her book is The Female Assumption, and it's wonderful. And once I read it, I thought, what a gift to women all over the world. It absolutely frees us. So let's meet Melanie and see what she has to say about motherhood and women in general. Hi.
Thank you for inviting me, Lisa. I really appreciate being here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. What an accomplishment.
Yes, it's been a almost 4-year journey to that accomplishment. They call it the birthing a book process. So it's definitely been a journey, and one that I've learned and grow and evolved through as I've delved into the topic.
Why did you write this book?
You know, I don't think I would have written this book if I didn't have a daughter of my own.
And tell us a little bit about this book, because it's a mother story freeing women from the view that motherhood is a mandate.
Right. So we all have a female in our life, whether
Yes.
it's a sister or a friend or a niece or a daughter. And so I have a daughter. And I think from the time that she was born, I always felt that I was going to find a way to impart some of my experiences with womanhood. And I read a quote in Madeline Kane's book. It was spoken by an infertile woman who said that she didn't feel that life was worth living because she couldn't have a child. And so that really struck me very hard, and I thought, I began thinking about what are those things that women feel makes life worth living. And I started to think about my own experiences. So I've had a 30-year journey through motherhood, and when I started out motherhood, you have these visions of what your life is going to look like. You have these visions of what your children's life are going to look like. And my life went from, marriage and babies to divorce and single motherhood, a very, very hard time in my life because I didn't have a lot of education, so a little bit of near poverty experiences. And so I think when you envision what your life is going to look like as a mother, and then it doesn't quite line up, and then I started to think about what is it that we're telling females in general about motherhood. And I thought, if we're going to tell females that they should do this thing, then what are we telling them about it? So I think I always wanted to find a way to tell my daughter about my experiences without regret, without any hint of regret, because that would erase 3 people from my life, right? So I think I just wanted to delve deep into the topic. And
Well,
so
my mother always told me, never have children. She had 5
Oh.
daughters. Never do it. It's not worth it.
Oh my.
I'm like, what do you mean? You wouldn't have had any of us. And all
Oh.
of us were very close with my mom and my dad, but very close with my mom. And we're like, what would you do without all of us in your life? Because she was kind of a loner.
Right.
So she didn't go out very much because she was married to a Middle Eastern guy, and everything she had to do was to go to the events of the family. Middle Easterners have a big family, so it's
Right.
weddings, funerals, this, that. And she wasn't really, especially with 5 kids, it's very difficult to go out. So
Yes.
she was basically a housekeeper, a cook, a chauffeur, a nanny, everything. And she just said, she got pregnant at 18 though, and had 5 kids by 22. So she said, my whole life was that, and I never got to pursue my dreams. And she went on to talk about a few other women who never had children and what their life looked like, and they didn't have regrets. And she said, go live the life that you were meant to live, and maybe one day have 1 or 2, but she said, definitely don't do it younger. She said, if I had to do it over again, I probably wouldn't have even done it. She said, even though I have all of you in my life today, her feeling was if she chose a different path, she'd still have plenty of fabulous women in her life or friends in her life.
Right.
So I understand what she said. Now that I have a daughter, it's so much work for one, and she had 5. So, it's so much work if you want to be a real hands-on mom.
Right.
And really be there for them. And
Right.
I want to put her to bed every night. I want to take her to school in the morning. I want to pick her up.
Right.
So it gets challenging. But it's okay to choose not to.
Right. And so I'm one of 5.
Yeah,
and
there's
so
nieces and nephews. There's everything.
as I look at my own mother's experience, we look at our mother's experiences, and I never got any messages from my mom. I never heard about the sacrifices. I never heard not to do it, to
She
do
never
it.
shared that with you.
It just, no. Mm-mm. So it was just, and it's just something, a child of the 60s, I don't know, the voices of Gloria Steinem and other people had just quieted, or they didn't reach my small Midwestern town where I grew up. It was just what women did. My mom, my sisters, my aunts. And so I
and
never...
if you don't do it, you're strange. And what's wrong with
Exactly.
her?
I mean, those were all the
stigma.
examples.
Yes.
So as I started to... So then I was in a sociology class, and I heard just a very deep discussion about women's lives and women's history, and how our voices, women's voices, have always been stifled. And this really isn't new news, right? So women haven't had the vote yet for since 1920, so it hasn't even been 100 years. Our voices, although there've been writers and women all along who've tried to amplify their wishes to do other things. So, as I reflected on my own experiences, and then I started to talk to women, and I started to interview and poll women. So I ended up reaching 200 women, which through the through the polls, I polled women who were mothers of daughters, and many of them had multiple daughters. So I probably reached about 300 lives, or that represents about 300 to 400 lives. Females' lives. And so I began to hear voices of pain and confusion, and sometimes anger, and sometimes depression. So, for instance, one woman that I spoke to, she said, well, and she doesn't want children. And she said...
How old is she?
Upper 20s.
Okay.
And so she just said, people tell me, or ask me, what if I birth the next Mozart or the person who cures cancer? And she wants to know, but what if I'm the next person to change the world? And she gets confused when people fixate on a progeny that doesn't exist rather than her own potential. And so that's just one perspective out of this whole, spectrum of womanhood, if you will. So there's women who expected it and didn't find it. And I think that when we tell women that they must do this thing, but we don't prepare them for what it's really going to look like. And my experiences are not going to be someone else's experience.
Of course. And depending on your age, and depending on what school you go to, because now they have a lot of education in parenting in some schools. Mm-hmm. I know several of my friends' children are in those, and they have a baby, a computer baby, where it starts
cries
crying,
in the middle of the
night. You have to then get up and do something.
Right.
Attend to whatever it is. It's like a program.
Right.
So I think that's wonderful. And I think you really have to think of steps before you want to become a parent. Can you share some of those steps?
Preparing a female for what might be involved. Well, I do delve very deep in my book about, the 3 phases of motherhood. So depending on your income level,
So what are 3 steps, those simple steps that you think they should think about before becoming a parent or not becoming a parent?
Well, I think for one, I think women should feel free to really think about their life choices, all of their life choices. So we tell women, females, all those doors are open or ajar, but be careful, don't choose that one that excludes motherhood. So I think it's really hearing that message that you are free to look at all the different avenues to meaning and fulfillment and happiness. And I'm not sure that I can come up with just 3.
Well, my 3 would be really think about it, what you just said, like journal about it, look at the 3 doors, think about really what you want in your life, and decide which one is really right for you. And I would say revisit it each year. And another thing would be I would spend time babysitting, volunteering, going to a children's hospital,
Right.
really caring babies, really spend, make that your volunteer work if you want to be a mom. Spend time with babies and spend time with your nieces, nephews, your friends' kids. Really take them on as play dates and get to know different personalities, because you never know what you're going to get. My daughter is 6 now, and she has 4 or 5 really close best friends, and they're all so dramatically different. So you never really know what you're going to get, because it does depend on nature and nurture.
Right.
So depending on your financial and emotional state, your children have a wide window of how they're going to shift, because if they're not getting their needs met, you're going to have a child that's really going to act out, and that's really going to dominate your life.
Right.
And 3, I would look at financial to see what can I afford comfortably, because again, I have a lot of people who come and sit on this couch when I'm doing coaching that their whole life has been thrown upside down having children because of the expense. I said, I had no idea this costs this much just to do this, just to do that. Just if I want to go out, no one will work for me for less than $15 an hour to babysit my kids. If I want to go out, it's minimum $30 for 2 hours,
Right.
and it's never 2 hours. So it's too expensive, so they feel stifled, and that's when divorce happens. A couple I'm counseling right now, he had to go away for 6 months, and the woman, and they're both in their 40s, and they have a 6-year-old, and she has had him for 6 months pretty much by herself. And he came back. She said, I want a divorce, and I don't want this child anymore. You get full custody.
Oh my.
Because she said, I need to go out. I feel stifled. I can't just be a PTA mom. I just can't. I thought I could. She could when they were together.
Right.
But she said, now I'm over the top. I know I can't. And she's leaving March 1st.
That is one of the things, what you said about, volunteer with children, borrow a child for a weekend. That is one of the interviews that I had, was a woman who was a nanny for a period of time, and it drove her crazy. And when she called her mom and she said, I don't think I ever want to do this motherhood thing, and her mom said, oh, it's different when they're your own. And I disagree. I actually disagree with it.
I agree with her, because I think it is different. I have a lot more tolerance or patience for my daughter, because I see every aspect of her, and I understand why she's being a certain way, because I'm with her all the time. And someone else's kids, someone else is raising them, giving them different values. So if those aren't in alignment with mine, I don't feel comfortable to go and shift that person or say, this is how you need to parent, or, because everyone has their own journey. So and they go back to that person, then you get them again. So they're living under that roof. So that may not work with whoever, like your friend.
It's different when they're your own, though. Can be a little bit of a platitude. It can be a little bit of a talking them into doing this thing. So they've taken it on. They've tried it out. They don't like it. They don't want it. And what they need to hear, instead of, well, you should go ahead and do it anyway, they might hear a little bit more open-minded response. So her mom might have said something like, well, so you've taken this on, you've tried it out. Give yourself some time and think some more about it. So it was almost like there are so many things that people say, and I don't mean to say mothers. It's definitely society in general.
Yes.
So some of the things that I call out, that I've heard people say, mothers. I never knew love until I became a mother. And that's something that I don't agree with. I think it can be the reality for someone who maybe grew up, was abandoned or neglected. But by and large, I hope for most of us, our love began with our own parents and siblings if we had them. So there are a lot of platitudes that we give women that make them feel that they must do this thing. And so I think that's where, when you ask me why did I start to take on this topic, it's because I've been through a lot of peaks and valleys of motherhood and what you think it may look like. So in the example of the woman who, had a lot on her plate by herself, she may not have ever envisioned that it was going to be like that, but it is going to be like that. I mean, you have women who their husbands travel all the time, or they're in the military, and so how you envision motherhood may not match the reality. And so how you envision your children's future selves may not match what they end up to be. And that's where I really keep coming back to is you cannot know what your children will believe or achieve or want once they become adults. I have 2 adult children, and you raise them, you give them the tools, and then you have to take a step back and say, okay, this is who they are. And so I think the power of your words when they're growing up is very important, and it leaves room for their future selves. If you, and it really comes down to diversity of thought. We often believe that people should do as we do and want what we want and believe as we believe. And this can be a lot of different topics, not just motherhood. So, it's that the diversity of thought, or staying away from ethnocentricity. Ethnocentricity, my culture is the best.
Yes.
What I've done is my way is the best way.
Yes.
So diversity of thought, and you really cannot know what your children are going to believe or be able to achieve when they're grown.
That's what
you
I
may
love
assume to know.
Yes, that's what I love about travel so much, because I went and stayed with so many different families around the world. And when you travel, you get to see all these different parenting styles. And most of these countries, it's a village that takes care of a kid. It's not just one mom, especially if you don't have money. You're one mom sinking or just feeling scared and fear, and you want so much for your child, but you can't, and depression, and that affects your parenting.
Right.
And so it's all those things to consider before having a child. But if someone really wants it, I think they should have a child regardless, because life will support you in some way.
Absolutely. And my message has never been to advocate
Absolutely
for
not.
or against motherhood.
That's what I love about your book. It's just really explains every avenue and the stories. So anyone who's really considering, should I have a child or not? Even if you have a child, it's really interesting reading for any woman to explore even her choice.
And so
it takes pressure off.
Back to those, questions that you're mulling over. Is this for me? Is it not for me? One of the things that I keep coming back to is stability and support systems. So whatever those are,
absolutely.
I talk about the parenting partnership and how that doesn't have to be, mother, father, husband, wife. It doesn't have to be that. There's statistics that talk about same-sex unions that do quite well with raising children. And so, or there's extended families, and what you're talking about, the village raising the child. So I think that's very important when you think about having a child. What are those support systems going to be for me? How, what is that stability that's going to be there for my child and for the mother? So giving her some balance. So that's very important to think about ahead of time if you can, although 50% of all pregnancies are unplanned, and 70-something% are unplanned in the age group of 18 to 29, and it's even higher for teens. So, sometimes thinking ahead of time isn't always, and that's why I have a whole chapter devoted to reproductive health information. And, I've given my daughter the book, Our Bodies Ourselves. They have one that's Our Teens Ourselves. And talking about those topics with our daughters or nieces. Well, I guess that's not really the place to talk with our nieces, but talking about reproductive health in a really open-minded way is very important at young ages, just to open that door So I didn't have that. I told my mom, I quoted you, I wrote an article, and I started it out as the talk of sex and all that was in the closet, when I grew up, and that's where it belongs. And I said, luckily in our closet was a copy of this book on reproductive health. So it is important to have these honest, two-way conversations,
Yes.
at least open that door. And there's a lot that I cover about motherhood, but also womanhood and women's rights.
Yes. What would you tell your 18-year-old self today?
I would tell, it's funny because my daughter's 17 and I've watched a couple of a few of your interviews, so I was anticipating that question, and I said, would you like to know my answer? And she said yes. I said I would tell my 18-year-old self to really love myself, to take time to know myself, and to pursue my education earlier. I took the 20-year route, and it was really hard, and a lot of people do that. They go back and get their degrees later in life, and it was really hard juggling family and work and school. So I would definitely advise myself, my 18-year-old Melanie, to get your education just a little bit earlier. So
what about in regards to children? Was that
about children
for you? Did you have them too soon?
I did get married very young, and I did have 2 children from my first marriage, and I would never tell my 18-year-old self to do anything that would erase them. When I started writing about this, my biggest fear was that one of my children would interpret regret, and I told my oldest 2 are sons, and I told them right away that I was going to be writing something about this, and I wanted them to know, no matter what you read, know that I would never make any different decision that would erase your faces from my life for my sons or my daughter.
Yeah,
so
I think they probably would get that knowing who you are.
they definitely understand the intention.
Yeah, you're just trying to share their choices.
Yes, to open up
yes.
our minds to what makes a woman whole.
It's like Jennifer Aniston. She can't catch a break. It's everyone, regardless of what she does, it goes back to, is she pregnant? Poor Jennifer, she doesn't have a baby yet.
Thank you.
That's her whole, buzz about her is just that. Yeah, she's doing this and that, but is she pregnant or not? And that is so challenging. I mean, and it's not fair at all.
Right. And so one of the women, plenty of the women actually, would say, no matter how successful I was in my career, all anybody wanted to know was, TikTok, when are you having, when are you having babies? And so I did experience that actually in my second, so I've been happily remarried for 20 plus years. And when I remarried, we had a private conversation that we wouldn't have a child. And so, but we didn't talk about it because really, I wonder if anyone ever realizes that that truly is bedroom territory that you're talking about. And so we had agreed not to have a child of our own, and we got married, and we were questioned many, many times, and the circumstances of my life changed. I didn't have the energy. I'd come through single motherhood, and I was poor, and so I didn't have family close by, and I didn't have those support systems. So my life situation changed, and we were 5 years into our marriage before we did have more conversations and evolve and change our mind and had our daughter. And great thing, wonderful decision. So
that's so beautiful because you found someone who you felt it's the right choice now, after spending some time with them, not just out the gate.
Right.
So you had developed some sort of structure just between the two of you and had more grounding and support, perhaps.
Right.
So you thought,
but we did go through a lot of that questioning.
Of course. That's wonderful.
So that's what women keep getting questioned, and they keep hearing this, the mother-child bond is the truest form of love. And my life was meaningless until I had a child. That was one woman who I interviewed, and her mother was always very supportive, telling her, you have to do what's best for you. And so she went through her life. She found herself later in her 30s with a medical issue where she is infertile. But she came to more peace with her life because her mother, she'd always heard very strong messages of do what's best for you. So I think the power of our words just can't be underestimated in helping females to really consider their inner selves, discover who they are, and making room for their future selves, because it's so important. And what child ever wants to disappoint their parent? So yeah, the power of our words just can't be underestimated. All the platitudes that we say as mothers, full of love and emotion. We have to be careful who's listening.
Yes.
You know, I have friends that post things on Facebook, and I know that other women are on, you know, that of our friends are listening to what they're saying, because I've had conversations with them, and so I think we just have to be careful sometimes about who's listening in what we say. So
what do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy, I would like to be about peace and acceptance. I really would like for people to accept the idea that there are many paths to meaning and happiness and love. And I think that if more people have this acceptance, we all live inside our heads to a certain extent, right? But it's what we do with those assumptions that really matter. And so if we open our minds just a little bit more and accept that there are many paths to a fulfilled female experience, there will be, I hope, more peace for females and for themselves and for them and the people in their lives.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure and my honor.
Such a great topic to free women.
Yes. So. To think big.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And to love whatever choice you made. So thank you so much.
Thank you.